Hello, my name is Mike, and this is a like. Yeah, hit the old like button. It helps my channel, do something. I bet you guys thought I was going to say my name is Mike and this is a bike because I'm surrounded by bikes. Well, the reason I didn't say that is because today's episode is on the Yard Art Cougar once again. If you've been following my channel, you saw in previous, the shorts, previous couple of shorts I did on this car, I cobbled together a condenser core because even though the car came with factory air conditioning, a lot of the components were missing. Previous owners discarded them because they didn't want air conditioning. This is Arizona. Air conditioning is pretty much mandatory. So anyway, I got the inside motor door stuff all working okay, but now I got to get the refrigerant system put back together. And I don't have any of the original parts, so I've got a cobble. Yep. Anyway, I've got a bunch of stuff. We're going to start the cobbling process, so stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least 2 cool wheels.
So let me show you what I've got so far. Alright, this is the aftermarket condenser core that we got. It fits in there very nicely. And now I just got to route some lines to the evaporator core at the firewall and of course to the compressor. Now, kind of the main thing is that we're dealing with different year stuff. So this was an expansion valve type system. This was a pressure cycling type system, but it's all irrelevant because it will work, I think. Well, I proved that because I've done this in other vehicles. So I got this manifold off of a Ford truck. And the reason I got it off a Ford truck is because, well, the engine is from a Ford truck and, the compressor's got to bolt up. The only drawback to this is it's kind of in the way of the dipstick here. So I've already tweaked it a little bit. I need to kind of straighten this bend out more so it comes more this way, because ultimately it's got to go over here, and as you can see it's kinking the hose here. So we're going to try and straighten this out, maybe even curve it back this way without kinking this. You know what? I'm not a kinky guy, what can I say? So we'll do that. So the hoses kind of sort of reach. It's the low pressure hose. We'll make it all the way back over here to the firewall area. Here's the original low pressure hose. I don't know if the ends, if I can make some adapters or something, but if worse comes to worse, I can just, sever it here and put a splice in and splice it into this one. This one's not, it's not real healthy. It's got a pretty serious kink in it there. So we'll figure something out there. On the high pressure side, here's the original hose, which actually has the expansion valve. This has got to go back in. So regardless of what hoses I use, I've got to be able to reinstall this thing. That looks like a pretty standard AC fitting, and I may be able to just order that and then just get new hose, When I did the Rusty Grenade, I bought a bunch of this bulk hose. We've got one little piece left. I may need that. I don't know. And then the other thing I got was a receiver dryer. This is a aftermarket deal, and it'll mount right here very nicely, right where I can see the sight glass. And then I've got a factory opening here for the hoses to, go between the gadgets and another thing. And so Now all I need is the fittings to make those connections, which I also ordered online. Dump these out. There we go, fittings. So these I can just simply clamp to some bulk AC hose if necessary. And hopefully I've got enough here to do a complete cobble job. Let the cobbling begin. You'll notice that this is located a little further back than where I initially wanted to put it, but it's the only way to make the hoses reach it. And so I had to sacrifice the original, genuine, mercury windshield washer bottle. It leaks anyway, so it's an original part. So what I'm doing is I'm taking away the right part so I can install the wrong part, because it works. Well, I've come to kind of a stopping point. I need to come up with some more parts. Let me show you how far we got, and then we're going to have to go and do a little bit of purchasing. I know where to go to get the bulk hose, but I need another fitting so that I can connect the low side. Here's what I mean. The types of fittings that were used on older cars are entirely different than what they use today. So I cut off a piece of the old original low pressure hose because the fitting fits here. High pressure hose, it actually worked out pretty good. It connects where it used to with the expansion valve on it, and it routes over there. I just need to get a little section of hose to connect it here. So that's good. It's the low side that's going to be my problem, because here's my low side hose, and as you can see, that's a different diameter than that. So I can't just use a barbed coupler. Plus, I've got to have some kind of a low pressure port so I can put refrigerant in it. You can't have a jar without a lid or something like that. So I'm going to go to the junkyard and see if I can find a section of AC tube with a low pressure port on it that has one side on one side and the other size on the other side. And maybe I can come up with that. So that's going to have to be like a junkyard cobble part. And then the other thing that I'm going to need is, well, I've got enough hose to go from the receiver dryer to the condenser core. So I've got this little section here. It's going to take a pretty sharp bend here. I either had to use a straight ahead, which bumped into stuff, or a 90 degree. I didn't have any 45 degree fittings. But that'll be all right, because it'll take this curve okay. And then I'll probably have to pad this with something so it doesn't, slice into the hose. So that one's okay. But I do need some hose to go from my high pressure line coming out of the compressor, and it's got to make it all the way down to that fitting down there. And this isn't nearly long enough. Yeah, you might be saying, why can't I use this piece of hose? It's got a fitting on it. Maybe I can. Maybe I don't have to go to the junkyard. If I slice it off here, put some barbs in it, that might actually work. Well, it's certainly something I can look at. Nonetheless, I'm going to cut the swedge here, get a piece of bulk hose to go that stretch. More of this stuff here. Don't have enough. And then I need 4,752 hose clamps. So, off to the stores and junkyards and hydraulic supply places I go. Days, and I was able to round up the remaining parts that I need to, cobble the system together. The parts I think I'll need. Anyway, the first place I went to was a local hydraulic supply place called Bernell, B-E-R-N-E-L-L. Now, you might be wondering, why would you go to a hydraulic supply place for air conditioning parts? Turns out they have all kinds of different hoses, including refrigerant hose. And all different sizes, and I needed a couple of different sizes. Not cheap, but I know they'll work and they'll hold up. And then when I needed that fitting for the low pressure side, well, I went to my favoriteest place of all, the junkyard. Went to a local pick apart, and I found a Honda Civic. Now you might be asking, why did I get an AC hose from a Honda Civic? You're not asking? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. The reason I got the hose from the Honda Civic is because, well, this little tube here is a slightly smaller diameter than most of the other cars. And I got to try to make that fitting fit into that really small hose that came with the Yard Art Cougar. And for whatever reason, it's a really small diameter. So hopefully I can heat it up a little bit and jam that end into it and get a good seal. Anyway, so this fitting should be cobbleable. Cobbleable, is that a word? Anyway, let the cobbling resume. me show you what I've come up with. I can't say I'm proud of it. I mean, I've kind of cobbled before. You know, fabrication's a good thing, but this, well, if it works, it'll be justified. Have a look. So my low pressure line routed across there, and here you see this huge compilation of hoses and clamps and fittings and tubes, and there's no easy way around it.
This is the original low pressure hose, and it's much smaller than the diameter of low pressure hoses they use these days. So even though this is the same size and this is the same size, there had to be an interruption here so I could get a low pressure valve put in. So this is the one I stole from a Honda. I thought I could make the end of this fit directly into this by heating this up, and it didn't work. I got it really hot to the point where it nearly caught fire, and it didn't stretch or expand at all. So then I got a couple of fittings, went down to the hardware store, and I was able to step from a smaller size to a larger size. And that's why there's so much going on. Smaller hose, step up to a larger hose, and then I've got a place to charge my system. And you know, it's not really in the way, but it's not out of the way. It'll be all right. So that much is good. I've reconnected both the low pressure and high pressure hoses. I do have to find, there's supposed to be a little clampy thing that holds this bulb to the evaporator case, and that way the expansion valve can sense the temperature of this tube, and then you wrap it in this goop tar paper stuff. I'll deal with that later. I just want to get refrigerant in it for now. Then the other hose, the other high pressure side of the hose, follow it. It goes back around here, and it goes over here. And this is the part that's really questionable, because even though I have a receiver dryer, well, I've got to connect it to this hose. And once again, we're talking about a lot of different sizes and stuff. Now, this fitting here had threads on it. And this fitting here has absolutely no business being in the equation whatsoever. This is actually an air fitting, and it's got like a 3/8 pipe thread. And this is another AC thread. But they fit, sorta. I cranked it down real tight. It's probably going to leak. There is an O-ring in there. But before I start cutting and splicing again, like I did over here, I thought I'd give it a try. We'll put a can of gas in it. I want to put a can of gas in it to check for leaks anyway, and to push out all the air and debris and stuff. So we're going to do that. And then, of course, the receiver dryer and the hoses going out to the condenser core. Now, when I figured out how this was going to route, and before I even cut this hose and laid it out, I made sure it wasn't going to kink. But look what happened once I tightened everything down. Got a little kink to it. Not a lot I can do. Maybe when it's under pressure, it will inflate and not be kinky. I don't know, maybe if I cut some off or make it go more downish. I don't know. We're going to have to try it and see what happens. And then more modifications can be made as necessary. So, first thing I'm going to do is disconnect it from the compressor, get a little funnel, and put some PAG oil in it. Now you might ask, how much PAG oil should I put in it? Well, I just told you, some. The amount I have here, that looks like some, so that's what's going in it, because that's all I've got. Hopefully that'll be enough to lubricate the compressor so it doesn't lock up on its maiden voyage. And then I can always stop by the auto parts store and pick up a can of refrigerant that has the PAG oil in it or something like that. Anyway, we'll oil it, we'll throw a can of gas in it, we'll sniff it and see if there's any leaks. And once I've done that, I have another mission to accomplish. I got to be able to supply power to my compressor. So I've got some wire connector thingies back here. Don't know what they go to, but I'm pretty sure one of them is a signal from the AC control head to the compressor clutch. So we'll get that wired in as well.
Oh boy. Forgot to tighten that one. Oops. This is my universal sniffer. It, smells Freon. We'll set her to beep. Okay, we'll crank it up to mega sensitivity, so if I have any small leaks, it'll spot them, in theory. All right, let's check the cobble joint first, because that's the one I really suspect. Nothing there. This fitting was loose, but it's tight now, not leaking. No leaking at the hose joints. And here. Uh-oh, picking up something down here. Got a leak on the bottom hose of the condenser core. Let's see where else we're leaking. Nothing there. That's good. Oh, something there. The cobble fittings, not surprised. And then, what about the factory couplers? They seem to be, it's fine. So I've got 2 leaks to chase. Let me address those, and hopefully it's just a matter of snugging some hose clamps on that one. This one down here, I don't know. It's tight. That one's good now. So I did find some loose hose clamps. Not loose, just not super snug. Uh-oh, thought I heard something. That might be a residual too. Yeah, that was residual. So maybe not. Try to disperse the old refrigerant that was leaking. Yeah, she's good. Alright. Alright, so now I've got to evacuate the system properly, remove all the air from the system, because even with the refrigerant we add in there, it's kind of right now it's a mix of air and refrigerant. So we'll suck all that crap out and put some fresh refrigerant in it. We may actually have functioning AC. Rooting around in here, and I think I found the correct harness. Where'd it go? Right here. That looks like the plug we need. Take as much harness with it as we can, and snip. Yeah. This is why I save everything. You never know. Alrighty, so plugs right in. But as you can see, somebody's been fixing on it before me, and you can tell that it wasn't me because, well, they actually used solder instead of crimp connectors. But then I got to noticing, well look, both the positive and negative side of the coil are connected to each other. How can that be? Then I realized, well, this is actually a factory splice here, and this isn't just a piece of wire. if you look closely, it is a diode. There is a diode in this wire. This is a diode jumper, and it's here to avoid kickback spikes. And I don't want to get into a long dissertation, but basically what it boils down to is anytime you have a magnetic field, like the coil on this clutch, when that magnetic field collapses, when you shut it off, it sends a voltage spike right back up the wire it came out of. And that voltage spike can be damaging to other components. So for example, on an F150 that this came from, that voltage spike would go back to an electronic AC control head or possibly even the ECM and damage it. It's not much of a problem for an old car like this because these older cars, well, they don't have sensitive electronics. So those voltage spikes aren't really that much of a big deal. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and leave that in there because, well, you know, it's easier. So I haven't chased down any wiring yet. I'm just going to temporarily rig this up with some jumper wires. I've grounded it here, and then I've got a wire here so I can activate the clutch just to make sure the clutch even works. Let's see what happens. I'm going to touch it right there. Alright, so we know our clutch is good. I'm going to shoot a little refrigerant in it and spin this thing and circulate that oil. On the old systems with the sight glass, you can see there's like bubbly, foamy stuff. You keep adding refrigerant until that runs clear, and you know that it's gotten to the point where it's a liquid when it passes through it instead of a gas. Well, it's the next day. Let me show you what I did. Alrighty, with the help of my handy dandy schematic, I identified the correct connection here at the firewall, and we have wired in our compressor clutch. Theoretically, when I turn the AC switch on the dash, we should have compressor clutch engagement. Sounds good, right? Let's try it out and see if it actually blows cold air inside the car. Alrighty, let's see what we get. Alrighty, that's going to do it for this episode. Everything works the way it's supposed to, and believe it or not, I don't have any refrigerant leaks. First thing this morning I did was check for leaks before I even connected the wiring harness. But, like everything else, now I have a new problem. Yeah, if in previous videos you saw me get all those mode doors working, they're not working no more. So I do have cold air. It just blows cold air through the heater vents down at my feet. A little bit comes through the dash vent, enough to move that temperature gauge. So in order for me to get the AC actually working right, I got to figure out where my vacuum leak is. You know, these old cars, their vacuum hoses are, 40, 50 years old. Guess what happens to rubber after 50 years? Yeah, it disintegrates. So something tells me I'm going to be stringing some vacuum hoses everywhere. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out my channel. Be sure to tell your friends so you can bore them to tears as well. See you next time. looking around. Nope, this ain't gonna go. Oh man.